You think your family gatherings are tense? Imagine a world where your mother-in-law calls the police because the ice cubes are too cold, or sues you for emotional distress because your baby is bald. We are tracking 69 times the line wasn't just crossed. It was obliterated by delusion, lawsuits, and 911 calls over absolute nonsense. If you think you have seen crazy, you are not ready for this. 1. A woman actually called the police on her son's wedding day, but not because of a crime. She was furious that the bride refused to let her walk down the aisle holding the groom's hand. She claimed it was elder abuse to deny her that special moment. When the officers arrived and realized she was just having a tantrum because she wasn't the center of attention, they gave her a choice to leave quietly or get arrested for misuse of emergency services. She left, but screamed that the bride was kidnapping her baby. 2. Imagine coming home to find your mother-in-law scrubbing your floors. Sounds nice, right? Not this one. She filed a formal complaint with the couple's landlord claiming the apartment was a health hazard because it smelled too much like bleach. She argued that the extreme cleanliness was evidence of a meth lab or some other illicit activity. The landlord actually came to inspect, found a spotless house, and told the mother-in-law to get a hobby. She literally tried to get her own son evicted for being too tidy. 3. On a hot day, a woman handed her mother-in-law a glass of ice water. One sip, and she spit it onto the carpet. Furious, the ice was too cold. She then tried to file a complaint with the fridge manufacturer, claiming the cubes caused thermal shock, and demanding a setting called Senior Safe Ice. 4. Naming a baby is a personal choice unless you deal with this nightmare. After a couple named their son Liam, the husband's mother threatened to sue them for emotional distress. Her reasoning was that Liam was the name of a boy who rejected her in the 3rd grade, and every time she looked at her grandson, she relived the trauma of that playground heartbreak. She demanded they legally change it to her father's name, Archibald, or she would write them out of the will entirely. 5. One newlywed couple went to Hawaii, and the groom's mother surprised them by booking the room next door. Then she complained to the front desk that the walls were too thick because she couldn't hear what was happening inside. She told the concierge, dead serious, she had a right to check on her son. Security escorted her away from the door. 6. A grandmother demanded a paternity test because the baby had brown eyes and her son had blue. When the test proved he was the father, she complained the lab rigged it because she had a gut feeling the baby wasn't even his. She insisted the hospital must have swapped the newborn and demanded the lab run it again with a more honest machine. 7. On Christmas, a mother-in-law opened a designer handbag and instantly demanded the receipt. Not to exchange it, she wanted to return it for cash to cover gambling debt. When the daughter-in-law refused, she called the store to complain they were financially abusing her by not letting her cash out a gift she didn't even buy. 8. A mother-in-law wrote a furious letter to her son's HR department demanding they ban his wife from company events because she was bad for his career. She literally called the wife the mistress, even though they'd been married 5 years and had 2 kids. HR had to call the son and explain his mother was trying to run his workplace like her personal reality show. 9. At Thanksgiving, a mother-in-law announced the turkey was disrespectful, and she wasn't even a vegetarian. Her real issue was that it had been carved before it hit the table. She demanded to inspect the packaging in the trash to verify the bird's brand, like she was auditing a crime scene. 10. After walking in on her son and his wife one too many times without knocking, the couple finally changed the locks. The mother-in-law called a locksmith and tried to report a robbery. She told the locksmith that squatters had taken over her son's house and changed the locks to keep her out. When the locksmith asked for proof of ownership, she screamed that her DNA was inside the house, meaning her son, so she owned the property by biological proxy. The police had to explain property laws to her like she was 5. 11. You might think Google reviews are for businesses, but one mother-in-law disagreed. She actually created a business page for her son's private home on Google Maps just to leave a 1-star review. She complained that the bed and breakfast had terrible service, lumpy mattresses, and a rude hostess who refused to serve breakfast in bed at 5 in the morning. When the couple tried to get the page taken down, she argued it was freedom of speech and that future guests deserved to know about the lack of thread count on the sheets. 12. A wedding photographer got a refund demand, not for bad photos, but because the mother-in-law wasn't photoshopped thinner than the bride. She filed a Better Business Bureau complaint claiming there was a verbal contract to make her the star. She said the angles were a targeted attack on her good side. 13. Most grandmothers are thrilled when a healthy baby is born, but this one was furious about the calendar. She lodged a formal complaint with the hospital administration because her grandson was born on a Tuesday. She had specifically requested a weekend birth so she would not have to take time off work to visit. She asked the doctors if they could legally alter the birth certificate to say Saturday, claiming that since the baby could not read yet, he would never know the difference. 14. A woman cooked a 5-course meal for her in-laws using top-tier organic ingredients. After one bite, the mother-in-law put down her fork and claimed she was having an allergic reaction. When asked what she was allergic to, she said she was allergic to poverty. She insisted the food tasted cheap and that her throat was closing up from the lack of quality. She demanded the daughter-in-law drive her to a Michelin star restaurant immediately to use their food as an antidote. 15. An avid gardener came home to find a citation from her homeowners association. It turned out her mother-in-law had called the HOA to report that the garden gnomes in the front yard were satanic idols that were cursing the neighborhood. She told the board members that every time she walked past the house, the ceramic gnomes whispered insults at her. She demanded the daughter-in-law not only remove them, but also pay for an exorcism of the flower bed to cleanse the soil of evil spirits. 16. We have all had annoying interruptions at work, but this is a career killer. A mother-in-law called her daughter-in-law's boss directly to file a complaint. She was angry that the daughter-in-law did not answer her text message within 2 minutes. The text was asking if she had a coupon for fabric softener. She told the boss that his employee lacked family values and should be demoted for prioritizing a quarterly budget meeting over saving 50 cents on laundry detergent. 17. Dogs are usually good judges of character, which might explain this one. After the family dog barked at the mother-in-law, she called animal control to report a vicious beast. She claimed the dog was trained by the daughter-in-law specifically to attack grandmothers. When the officer arrived, he found a sleepy golden retriever who just wanted a belly rub. The mother-in-law then accused the officer of being in on the conspiracy and threatened to sue the city for not protecting her ankles. 18. Driving her to the airport, the mother-in-law lost it because the daughter-in-law didn't punch it at a yellow light. She claimed waiting through one extra light cycle wasted about 3 cents of gas and demanded reimbursement, insisting cautious driving was slowly draining her son's inheritance. 19. Social media usage can be petty, but this is on another level. A mother-in-law reported her daughter-in-law's Facebook profile for impersonation. Facebook support reached out, confused, and the mother-in-law explained that the profile must be fake because the woman in the photos looked happy. She insisted that since her daughter-in-law was miserable to be around in real life, the smiling photos were a violation of community standards regarding truth in advertising. She wanted the account banned for spreading false joy. 20. During a solemn church service, a mother-in-law elbowed her son and handed him a written note of complaint. She was angry that his wife was singing the hymns too loudly. She claimed that the daughter-in-law's voice was attention-seeking and was distracting God from hearing the mother-in-law's own internal prayers. She demanded the wife simply mouth the words from now on so that the spiritual bandwidth wouldn't be clogged up by her mediocre soprano voice. 21. A couple bought their first house and invited the parents over for a tour. The mother-in-law walked into the master bedroom, took one look at the bed, and complained to the real estate agent that the room was defective. She was furious that the walls were not soundproof enough. She told the agent that she stays over often and refused to be subjected to the disgusting sounds of marital happiness. She actually requested a contractor come in to install industrial-grade foam before she would spend the night. 22. A mother-in-law decided to reorganize her son's kitchen while the couple was at work. When they got home, she was waiting with a bandaged foot and a lawyer on speed dial. She had dropped a heavy pot on her own toe while moving things nobody asked her to move. She blamed the daughter-in-law for owning dangerously heavy cookware and threatened to sue for personal injury unless they agreed to name their next child after her as a settlement for her suffering. 23. Imagine getting a letter from a lawyer because you didn't say "bless you." A mother-in-law sneezed at the dinner table, and in the chaos of passing the potatoes, the daughter-in-law didn't acknowledge it. The next day, the mother-in-law complained to the son that this was a deliberate attempt to curse her soul. She claimed that by withholding the blessing, the daughter-in-law was trying to invite demons into her respiratory system. She demanded a written apology notarized by a priest. 24. While the couple slept, the mother-in-law stormed into the bedroom, flipped on the lights, and declared an emergency. The sheets were low thread count and unsafe for her son's skin. She tried yanking the bedding off the mattress like she was rescuing him from sandpaper. Her fix? Replace everything with hotel-grade linens she picked out. 25. You expect to get a bill from a contractor or a lawyer, but not from your grandma. After watching her grandchildren for 3 hours, a mother-in-law handed her son a handwritten invoice. She wasn't just charging for babysitting. She included line items for stress, noise pollution, and missed soap operas. When the couple thought it was a joke and laughed, she threatened to take them to small claims court for theft of services and claimed that her time was more valuable than the Federal Reserve. 26. A woman was excited to show off her new engagement ring, but her future mother-in-law had other ideas. The older woman dragged her son back to the jewelry store and demanded a refund, not because the diamond was fake, but because it was too big. She loudly argued with the jeweler that a ring of that size would make her daughter-in-law arrogant and forget her place. She tried to force the store to swap it for a microscopic chip of a diamond to keep the girl humble. 27. After losing at Monopoly, a mother-in-law called the game company's customer support to report fraud. She claimed the money was counterfeit, the rules encouraged unlicensed banking, and the dice were rigged against seniors. She demanded a refund and a senior-friendly edition where she automatically starts with more cash for respect. 28. Most people bring wine to a dinner party, but this mother-in-law brought a scale. Before the meal began, she demanded her daughter-in-law step on it. When the poor woman refused, the mother-in-law filed a complaint with her son, claiming his wife was breaching the marriage contract by gaining 3 pounds since the wedding. She argued that she had reviewed the wedding vows and, while for richer or poorer was in there, for fatter was definitely not. So she had grounds for an annulment on his behalf. 29. A mother-in-law got her hands on the couple's Netflix password and immediately called customer support. She wasn't having technical issues. She was angry about the continue watching list. She complained to the Netflix representative that her daughter-in-law watched too many crime documentaries, which was clearly a sign that she was planning to murder the son. She demanded Netflix release the viewing history to the FBI as preemptive evidence and suspend the account until the daughter-in-law agreed to watch only wholesome cooking shows. 30. Imagine being jealous of a cat. A mother-in-law visited her son's house and saw the family cat sleeping on the son's lap. She went into a rage and called the local shelter to report animal abuse. Her reasoning was that the cat was using mind control to steal her son's affection. She told the shelter volunteer that the cat was an emotional vampire and demanded they come to seize the animal immediately so she could resume her rightful place on the couch next to her baby boy. 31. A couple decided to paint their living room a soft shade of blue. The mother-in-law saw it and immediately called the landlord, even though the couple owned the house. She pretended to be a concerned neighbor and reported that the house had been vandalized by colorblind hooligans. She claimed the shade of blue was so offensive it was causing her physical migraines from the street. She demanded the exterior and interior be repainted beige immediately, or she would sue the city for visual assault. 32. When a daughter-in-law got a promotion at work, everyone celebrated except one person. The mother-in-law called the company's CEO to file a formal grievance. She argued that giving the woman a raise would make her financially independent and therefore less likely to listen to her husband. She actually told the CEO that he was destroying the nuclear family by paying women a fair wage. The CEO recorded the call and played it at the company holiday party as an example of what they deal with. 33. A mother-in-law was furious that she wasn't invited to the delivery room for the birth of her grandson. In retaliation, she called the hospital billing department and tried to cancel her son's health insurance. She pretended to be him and claimed that since he didn't value family, he didn't deserve medical coverage. The fraud department caught on quickly when she couldn't answer basic security questions, like his date of birth, which she ironically got wrong because she was too busy screaming. 34. This one involves a blatant disregard for geography. A couple moved to a new state for a job opportunity. The mother-in-law filed a missing persons report for her son. She knew exactly where he was, but she told the police he had been brainwashed and kidnapped by a cult leader, also known as his wife. She insisted that no rational man would move 3 hours away from his mother unless he was under heavy sedation or hypnosis. She demanded a SWAT team conduct a wellness check. 35. A daughter-in-law baked a cake for a charity bake sale. The mother-in-law bought it, took a bite, and then sued the charity. She claimed the cake was dry enough to be a choking hazard, and that it was a deliberate attempt by the daughter-in-law to assassinate her via dehydration. She demanded the charity shut down, and that the daughter-in-law be banned from owning an oven. The judge threw the case out, but not before the mother-in-law tried to enter the half-eaten cake into evidence. 36. After the couple installed a smart doorbell, the mother-in-law realized every porch snoop was recorded. She called police claiming it violated the Geneva Convention. She demanded the footage be destroyed and the doorbell replaced with something non-hostile, like a mirror, so she could approve her own face before entering. 37. A backyard pool party turned into a legal drama when a mother-in-law dialed 911. She wasn't reporting a drowning or a fire. She was reporting public indecency because her daughter-in-law was wearing a two-piece swimsuit in her own private backyard. The mother-in-law told the dispatch officer that the bikini was a moral hazard that could corrupt the neighborhood squirrels. When the police arrived, they found a woman peacefully floating on a raft and a grandmother screaming about the decline of Western civilization. 38. Managing a household is tough, but one mother-in-law decided to get the federal government involved. She filed an anonymous tip with OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, against her son's home. Her claim was that the pile of laundry on the bedroom chair constituted a structural collapse hazard, and that the daughter-in-law was running an unsafe work environment. The inspector who called had to explain that a messy bedroom does not actually violate federal labor laws, much to her disappointment. 39. Taking your husband's last name is a tradition for many, but for this mother-in-law, it was a crime. She went to the courthouse to file a report for identity theft against her new daughter-in-law. She argued that she had worked 40 years to build the reputation of that last name, and the new wife was diluting the brand by using it without paying a franchise fee. She genuinely asked the clerk if she could trademark the family surname to prevent unauthorized usage. 40. A family dinner at a nice restaurant ended in disaster, and not because of the food. The mother-in-law demanded to speak to the manager and filed a formal complaint against the waiter. Her grievance? She claimed the waiter was flirting excessively with her daughter-in-law by refilling her water glass 3 times while only refilling the mother-in-law's twice. She insisted this hydration bias was a direct insult to her seniority and demanded the waiter be fired for water-based ageism. 41. We have heard of grandparents fighting for visitation rights with kids, but this woman hired a lawyer to sue for visitation rights to the family dog. She filed a legal motion claiming that the golden retriever was her grand dog, and that restricting her access to the animal caused her undue canine separation anxiety. She presented a binder of photos of her and the dog as evidence of a psychological bond, demanding weekends and alternating holidays with the bewildered pet. 42. Newborn babies cry? That is just a fact of life. But one mother-in-law called the hospital where her grandson was born to file a warranty claim. She insisted the baby was defective because he wouldn't stop crying when she held him. She yelled at the nurse administration that they must have swapped a good baby for a broken one and demanded a recall or at least a manual on how to mute the child. She was banned from the maternity ward. 43. Handmade gifts are usually cherished but not in this house. A daughter-in-law knitted a beautiful blanket for her mother-in-law's birthday. The next day, the mother-in-law showed up at the couple's house with the blanket and an invoice. She complained that the wool was too scratchy and demanded the cash equivalent of the time it took to knit it, calculated at minimum wage. She essentially tried to charge her daughter-in-law for the labor of making a gift she didn't even like. 44. A couple missed church one Sunday because they had the flu, and the mother-in-law took it as a sign of the apocalypse. She called their pastor and demanded he perform an exorcism on the house. She claimed that the flu virus was actually a demon trying to keep them from the collection plate. When the pastor refused to drive over with holy water and a crucifix, she filed a complaint with the church board stating the pastor was soft on Satan. 45. A son borrowed his own car keys from his mother, who was holding on to them for safekeeping, and drove to work. 10 minutes later, the mother-in-law reported the car stolen. She told the police that an unauthorized individual had taken the vehicle. When the police pulled the son over at gunpoint, she admitted she knew it was him, but she argued that he didn't ask for permission nicely enough, so in her mind, it was grand theft auto. 46. Wedding invitations are expensive, but this mother-in-law found a way to make them cost more. She returned her invitation to the sender, her own son, marked "Return to sender, addressee unknown." She then called to complain that the font used for her name was 2 points smaller than the font used for the bride's parents. She claimed this typographic slight erased her existence and demanded they reprint all 300 invitations with her name in bold, capitalized, and gold leaf. 47. A couple went on their honeymoon to Italy, and the mother-in-law called the travel agency to demand a partial refund. She wasn't on the trip. Her logic was that since her son was away and couldn't mow her lawn that week, she had to hire a landscaper. She argued that the travel agency should reimburse her for the landscaping bill because their enticing travel package was the direct cause of her grass getting too long. The agent reportedly laughed until they hung up. 48. Most people want their kids to earn more money, but this mother-in-law called her son's boss to complain that his salary was insultingly low. That sounds supportive until you hear the rest. She told the boss that her son couldn't afford to buy her a new car for her birthday, which was clearly a reflection of the company's poor compensation package. She threatened to organize a protest outside the office unless they gave him an immediate raise designated specifically for maternal gifting purposes. 49. At a family gathering, the mother-in-law hit the floor like she'd been exposed to a toxic agent because the daughter-in-law wore light floral perfume. She demanded someone call the CDC and called it a targeted chemical attack. Paramedics checked her vitals, found nothing wrong, and she still tried to blame the scent for attempted respiratory sabotage. 50. Weddings are stressful, but usually the vows go uninterrupted. Not this time. Right in the middle of the ceremony, the groom's mother stood up and shouted, "Objection!" The priest stopped, terrified, asking if there was a legal reason they couldn't marry. She didn't have a legal reason. She had a script edit. She loudly complained that the bride had omitted the word obey from her vows. She refused to sit down until the priest forced the bride to promise servitude to her son. 51. A son decided to get a memorial tattoo on his arm, and his mother treated it like a crime scene. She called the police to report a case of vandalism of private property. When the officer asked whose property was vandalized, she pointed at her 30-year-old son. She argued that, since she gave birth to him, his skin was technically her canvas, and the tattoo artist had defaced her masterpiece without a permit. The officer had to stifle a laugh while explaining bodily autonomy. 52. Seeing kale and spinach in the cart, the mother-in-law called the pediatrician's office to report nutritional cruelty. She insisted feeding a child that many vegetables was rabbit behavior and demanded a wellness check on the pantry for cookies because no normal home is this sugar-free. 53. The thermostat wars are real, but this escalated quickly. A mother-in-law staying for the weekend woke up chilly because the heat was set to 68 degrees. Instead of putting on a sweater, she called the HVAC company and reported a gas leak. When the technicians arrived with sirens blaring, she admitted there was no smell but claimed the Arctic conditions were a slow-motion murder attempt by her daughter-in-law to induce hypothermia and collect the life insurance money early. 54. School plays are supposed to be cute, but one grandmother turned it into a legal battle. When her grandson was cast as a tree in the third-grade production of The Wizard of Oz, she threatened to sue the school district for discrimination. She sent a cease-and-desist letter to the drama teacher, claiming that casting her genius lineage as stationary vegetation was an insult to her family name. She demanded the script be rewritten to give the tree a monologue and a solo song. 55. Technology can be confusing, but this was malicious. A mother-in-law was riding in her son's car when the GPS voice gave directions. She became convinced that the female voice on the GPS was a woman her son was having an affair with. She called the customer service line for the car manufacturer and filed a formal complaint against Siri for being a homewrecker. She demanded they change the voice to a deep baritone so her son wouldn't be tempted by the dashboard harlot. 56. A couple filled out their emergency contact forms at a new doctor's office, and the husband listed his wife as number 1. The mother-in-law found out and filed a HIPAA violation complaint against the clinic. She argued that biology trumps marriage, and by not listing her as the primary contact, the doctor was enabling a hostile takeover of her son's medical history. She insisted that she had a maternal instinct that was more accurate than any medical degree and needed to be consulted first. 57. Batteries die, it happens. But when the batteries in the TV remote died while the mother-in-law was watching her soap opera, she called 911. She told the dispatcher she was being held hostage. Her logic was that without the ability to change the channel or turn off the TV, she was being psychologically imprisoned by the daughter-in-law's negligence. She demanded the police deliver a fresh pack of AAA batteries immediately, or she would press charges for false imprisonment. 58. After the daughter-in-law got a huge raise, the mother-in-law called the IRS tip line out of pure spite. She claimed no woman makes that kind of money honestly, and hoped an audit would humble her into quitting and focusing on the home, like it was 1955 and she was the HR department of marriage. 59. Dinner at a steakhouse should be relaxing, but not when the leftovers arrive. The mother-in-law called the manager over to complain about the doggy bag. She was furious that the waiter had simply put the leftover steak in a box instead of folding the foil into the shape of a swan. She claimed this lack of origami was a direct insult to her social status and meant the restaurant thought she was trash. She refused to leave until the busboy sculpted a foil bird. 60. A couple planned an outdoor garden wedding, and naturally, it rained. The mother-in-law didn't blame bad luck. She blamed the meteorologist. She actually called the local news station and filed a complaint against the weatherman for false advertising. She claimed that he had predicted sun 3 days ago, and she had based her outfit on that forecast. She demanded the station pay for her dry cleaning and issue a public apology for ruining her hair with their lies. 61. A mother-in-law went through her son's trash, already a red flag, and found a box for a pregnancy test. She marched to the pharmacy where it was bought and demanded a refund. She wasn't the one who bought it, but she complained that the test was defective because she, the grandmother, hadn't felt a disturbance in the force. She claimed that if her daughter-in-law was actually pregnant, she would have known telepathically, so the test was clearly a scam selling false hope. 62. While house-sitting, a mother-in-law decided the house was too cluttered. She sold the daughter-in-law's vintage record collection at a yard sale for $5. When the couple came home horrified, she filed a complaint with the police against them. She claimed they were hoarders, creating an unsafe environment, and that she was performing a public service by liquidating their assets. She demanded a commission fee for her work as an unauthorized estate liquidator. 63. A mother-in-law bought the couple a high-end espresso machine for Christmas, then called the manufacturer to file a lawsuit a week later. She claimed the machine was a drug dealer that was destroying her family. Her reasoning was that the coffee was so good, her son was drinking it at home instead of coming over to her house for her instant crystals. She demanded the company issue a recall on the machine for alienation of affection. 64. During a Halloween party, the mother-in-law called the police to report a hate crime against her. She was furious about the jack-o'-lantern on the front porch. She insisted that the pumpkin's carved face was a caricature of her own face, and that the candle inside was a threat to burn her out. The officer had to awkwardly explain that a generic triangle-eyed pumpkin is not legally considered a portrait of anyone, let alone a grandmother. 65. A tech-illiterate mother-in-law stayed over and couldn't remember the Wi-Fi password. Instead of asking for it, she called the internet service provider to report a radiation leak. She told the support agent that the Wi-Fi waves were so strong they were erasing her memory and stealing her thoughts to send to the government. She demanded they turn down the brain scramble setting on the router so she could recall her Facebook login. 66. At a family picnic, the mother-in-law sat in a folding chair that slowly sank into the soft mud. She didn't stand up. She stayed there, sinking, and then called a lawyer to sue the ground. Yes, the dirt. She wanted to sue the landscaping company for soil negligence, claiming they used quicksand to specifically target her sciatica. She demanded they pave the entire backyard with concrete to prevent the earth from swallowing her whole again. 67. A couple bought a new car with a weight sensor in the passenger seat that turns off the airbag for light passengers. The mother-in-law sat in it, and the light stayed off. She was flattered until she misunderstood how it worked. When she found out it meant she was light, she complained to the dealer that the car was lying to make her let her guard down. She argued the car was trying to kill her with flattery and demanded a manual override for her safety. 68. When her grandson was born completely bald, the mother-in-law was not amused. She filed a formal complaint with the hospital administration, accusing the nurses of theft. She claimed that she had seen an ultrasound where the baby had hair, so the nurses must have shaved it off to sell on the black market for wigs. She demanded the hospital check the lockers of every staff member to recover the stolen family heirloom follicles immediately. 69. This is the ultimate crossed line. A mother-in-law showed up at the bride's father's house with a printed receipt she had made herself. She tried to return the daughter-in-law for a full refund of the wedding costs. She told the father that his daughter was defective merchandise because she refused to iron her husband's socks. She claimed the wife was falsely advertised as domesticated and demanded an immediate exchange for a more obedient model or store credit. After hearing 69 stories like that, your own family probably looks completely normal. But I know for a fact that some of you are sitting there thinking, I can beat that. So I am throwing down the gauntlet. I want to see if you can top this list. What is the absolute worst, most insane thing your mother-in-law has ever done to you personally? Don't hold back the details. I want to see the craziest story in the comment section win the gold medal. Drop a like if you are glad you aren't married to any of these people, and subscribe for more madness.